right, well, it is 2 o'clock. We still have a few people who've registered who've not yet shown up, but I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I am recording this, so I'll send that recording out to everybody who registered. So those of you who are here will have it to refer back to if you need, and then those of you who were not able to make it live will be able to watch it whenever you get a chance. So we will go ahead and get started. Welcome. I'm Samantha O'Connor. I'm the NC Cardinal Training Specialist. And today we're going to be talking about Evergreen cataloging basics. Primarily what that will mean is talking about working with holdings and records and how to manage them and work with them efficiently. I've structured today's program to basically move from item level functions into bibliographic level functions. Based on the registrations, we did have a lot of you today who are bib catalogers, but for those of you who are not yet bibliographic catalogers, but maybe are working towards that, I encourage you to kind of stick around because you might get some helpful information in the bibliographic section that will help you as you move forward with that. Those of you who are, maybe not planning to take that step, I still may get something out of that later section just because a lot of this stuff is sort of an ecosystem. So those tasks that you do as a bibliographic cataloger really influence how things show up for item catalogers and vice versa. That being said, this is not meant to be 100% comprehensive. We only have about an hour and a half to cover everything. And the comprehensive cataloging training that I do when libraries migrate into NC Cardinal takes 5 to 6 hours. So we will not be going into everything. Instead, I've picked out topics that I know come up a lot in tickets and in Basecamp, as well as some of the topics that were requested during registration. If there are questions about anything not covered, hopefully we will have a little bit of time at the end, and so you can bring those up. We might be able to get into them, we might not. But if we can't, then I hope to do another cataloging session at some point in the future, and I can try to tailor future sessions towards areas that did not get covered today. Also, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I will do my best to either answer your question or put you in touch with somebody that can. One last thing before getting started. I am not a cataloger. I have cataloged and I know how to catalog, but when it comes to the nuances of certain mark fields and authority records and things of that nature, I am definitely not your expert. So today's session is really meant to focus more on Evergreen and the functions and tools it offers to catalogers, not necessarily as a venue for, the finer points of RDA, that type of thing. So that being said, if there are questions or concerns about wider cataloging practices and how they're applied within the NC Cardinal Consortium or within Evergreen, please don't hesitate to ask them. We do have a lot of cataloging experts who've signed up today, so I'm hoping that we'll have some people on hand who might be able to jump in with an answer if I'm not able to answer it. And if not, it's something that I'm happy to look into and get back to you about in the future. But overall, today we will be covering managing holdings. We'll be talking about transferring those holdings, either due to cataloging error or just changes in how you have things arranged in your library, how you can fairly efficiently move holdings from place to place. We'll also talk about importing and overlaying records. We'll talk about merging. We'll talk about when and also the processes of how. So those of you who are not from NC Cardinal libraries, your local policies may not match what we do at NC Cardinal, but the method, the how of merging records will certainly apply. We'll talk finally about cataloging reports and some things that are built into Evergreen to help you ensure that your catalog is staying kind of neat and organized and as accurate as possible. So as we move forward, I will definitely invite you to ask questions. Feel free to put things in the chat. If we're not able to get into a question at the moment it's asked, then we'll hang on to it and get back to you in the future. And I do see that there is a question in chat right now about a recording of the 6-hour training. We do put those up on our YouTube channel. So you're welcome to go to our YouTube channel and kind of look around and see what you can come up with. If you'll give me a moment, I can try to get that link for you to our YouTube channel directly. So if we go into YouTube and we go to so the NC Cardinal YouTube channel is youtube.com/nc.cardinal. So I will just put that into the chat. Oh, it looks like Benjamin actually got a direct link to a video or to a playlist for those as well. So feel free to look around on there. There are a number of recordings of migration training as well as some other materials that might be helpful for you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with item cataloging, and under the sort of umbrella of item cataloging, we'll be talking about managing holdings and transferring holdings. Before we get into that, I wanted to do just a really quick kind of vocabulary overview to make sure that we're all on the same page about what different things that I say mean within this context. So holdings in general refers to items that are owned by libraries, kind of the physical items. And this covers two different levels. It covers the call number level, which in Evergreen parlance is the volume, and it covers the barcode level, which in Evergreen parlance is the copy. So really what we talk about when we talk about holdings is the physical item that you can hold in your hand, which is the copy, and then where that copy lives on the shelf, and that is the call number or the volume. And so item level catalogers within NC Cardinal fall into two different categories. There's item level and then there's bibliographic level. Those item level catalogers, this is where you're working. You're working within these two levels, the call number and barcode level. So that is what, when we're talking about item level cataloging, that's really what we're talking about. Now within those copies, there are a lot of details and information that you add to those copies that we call item attributes. And those attributes are basically the details that tell Evergreen how this item will function. So when an item circulates, it hits a circulation policy. That circulation policy is determined by information from the patron and information from the item. When you set up your item attributes, you're setting up the item information that is needed to determine that circulation policy. So this can be everything from, what the circulating library is set at, to whether or not the item circulates at all, to the circulation modifier. There are a number of different things that come up within item attributes. And really what you're doing when you're setting up those attributes is telling Evergreen how this item needs to function as people attempt to perform different tasks with it. A final piece of vocabulary to bring up is templates. Within Evergreen at large, there are a lot of different types of templates. Within cataloging, when we talk about templates, what we're primarily talking about are quick fill guides that allow you to fill in all those details for attributes for specific types of categories. So if you have an adult fiction template, then that is going to sort of pre-fill a variety of different attributes that apply to adult fiction books. So when you get a book to catalog that would fit into that category, you can use that template to fill in those attributes easily. And we'll see all of this kind of live in Evergreen in a few moments. A couple of things that I wanted to point out specifically. I'm going to go ahead and open up Evergreen. And a few things that I wanted to point out at the item cataloging level. The first is that when you are in the Holdings View tab, so when we come into a bibliographic record, one of the tabs here is the Holdings View tab. This is the tab where you're able to see different materials at different libraries within the consortium. You can see which libraries own that material. You can see how many call numbers have been attached to it at each branch, and then how many copies are attached to that call number within that branch. And one of the keys that really helps to make this more useful is the show and hide empty libs and call numbers. So up here, we have the ability to scope our holdings to either a system, a branch, or the entire consortium. Now, if I go up to the entire consortium and I look at Cardinal, this is going to give me a really long list. And the reason it's so long, even though you see zeros all up and down the call number and copy columns here, are because I have show empty call numbers and show empty libs checked. If I uncheck these, then even scoped to the Cardinal level, I will only see the libraries that actually own that item. So when you do not have show empty libraries checked, then you'll only see those libraries that own it. Now, this is really useful to be able to uncheck when you're looking at this larger Cardinal area scope, because it's such a long list of libraries. However, if you are at your system, we'll use Henderson for our example here, and you have this unchecked, you're only going to see the branches that own it. But if you want to do something that we're going to do in a few minutes, which is transfer items between branches, then it's also helpful to be able to see which branches don't own it. So this is a situation where I would want to check this box so that I can see everything. So this is just a useful tool that allows you to kind of determine exactly what slice of the overall holdings you're looking at any time. Some other things to see within this interface, if I come down here and click on one of these little arrows that are pointing in, and that'll actually open up the next level. So I have, you know, my system level, my branch level. Underneath my branch level, I then have call number level, and then underneath the call number level, I have the individual copies. And you can actually go in and edit the copies from this tab, so you don't have to go back to the item table and click on edit item. You can actually select the item that you'd want to edit, and you can come up here to the actions menu and choose to edit call numbers and items. And you basically have these three choices: edit call numbers and items, and edit items. They all pretty much take you to the same place. They're a little bit of a holdover from an earlier version of Evergreen. A couple of other tricks to keep in mind. One thing I wanted to show you is the Unified Holdings Editor. And I do believe that a lot of our NC Cardinal catalogers are already familiar with this because in the previous version, prior to 3.9, the Unified Holdings Editor was the standard. And so a lot of people have chosen to utilize this tool simply because it's similar to what existed in 3.7 and earlier. But for those of you who may have come in since that upgrade or just have not yet found this tool, I did want to point it out. So let's go ahead and go into a copy. I'm going to go into this one instead. Check the right thing. And I'm going to use the menu here to edit. And I'm going to go to edit call numbers and items. And when I do this, I do have mine set so that I'm seeing both call numbers and items on the same page. The default setting is not like this. So if you go into your Preferences tab and look down under this Holding Preferences section, you'll see that the bottom option is called Unified Holdings and Items Attributes Display. If this is not checked, and by default it won't be, you will actually have two separate tabs, one for essentially the call number and one for the copy or the item attributes. A lot of catalogers prefer to unify these so they can see everything in a single screen. So if you are not familiar with that tool, you might want to play around with it and see if it helps you with your workflow at all. A couple of other things to look at here. The batch editing call numbers is pretty useful. So if I am in my holdings editor screen and I'm adding a number of new copies, then I can do them one by one by coming in here and adding, my call numbers and my barcodes and everything. Or I can come up here to the batch edits and I can add several at once. So let's say I want to add a second item at Henderson, Maine, as well as a new item at Fletcher. So I click on this little plus sign here, and it asks me to choose my location. So I put that in, and then it's going to give me a list of all of the different locations where I'm going to have a call number for this item. So I now have 3 different potential call numbers, the existing one, as well as 2 new ones, one at Henderson, Maine, and one at Fletcher. You'll notice that it gave me the default Dewey number, and of course that's not what I want. I want all of my call numbers to follow my fiction call number classification. So what I can do is come in and do them all manually, or I can come up to this gray section up here and I can do them all at once. So I'm going to choose as my classification Dewey. I'm going to put in a prefix of FIC, and I'm going to put in a call number label of the author's last name. And then I'm going to choose batch apply. And so that is going to come down here, and it's going to not only add the author's last name to my call number label for the ones that were newly added, but it also included in that batch update the original one. So if I wanted to change the call numbers across the board, this would be a way to do that. Now I still have to go in and put my barcodes in individually because of course those are unique, so you're not going to be adding those in batch. I do have the ability also, if I wanted to, under this Fletcher line, I can add, just by clicking this button, additional call numbers where I don't have to choose my location, as long as I'm using this plus sign over here to the right. I can remove them if I have too many. I removed the wrong one, but that's all right. So those are just a couple of helpful tips about how to use the editor interface. One other thing to bring up here. So let's take a look at our item attributes section. So again, if you don't have that unified holdings editor checked, then this would be in a separate tab for item attributes. In this case, it's just down here below. This is where I put in all of those different details that I need about different aspects of the item, just to tell Evergreen how to circulate it. Oh, and Jessica asked, oh, somebody responded. Yep, the Unified Holdings Editor. So in the item attribute section, this is where I apply all of the pieces of information that tell Evergreen how this item circulates, how it holds, how fees are applied, that type of thing. And I can come in here and I can get all this set up manually right now. I can change my copy status so that both are available or both are in process. I'm going to uncheck the available one and keep the in process one checked and update it to be available. I can change my shelving location. So in this case, the one that was already in here was in adult fiction. The new one I've added has gone to a generic location of stacks that does not actually apply to any real location anywhere. So I need to make sure I change that one. So again, I'm going to uncheck the one that is correct. I'm going to keep the incorrect one checked, and I'm going to choose my adult fiction shelving location. Now I could make these different. So I could choose for the stacks, I could choose to move it to, let's see. I'm overthinking this. I'm just going to move it to adult fiction paperback. And so I could have these to be 2 separate things. My circulating library is set based on what I have up here. Some of these things are going to be set kind of automatically. So like the creation date and the active date, as soon as I save this, these 2 unset notes will be changed to today's date. The creator will be changed to me after I save this. Edit date will be as well. Over here in this sort of middle circulation column, it's already by default set to circulate and hold. I could add an age hold protection to it if I wanted to. I could also add a floating group if I wanted to. So if your library has that set up, floating group will basically allow it to function where if somebody texts this out from Henderson, Maine, and then returns it to Fletcher, then it will then live at Fletcher. And that will be set as the circulating library. The owning library will remain Henderson, Maine, but the circulating library will show as Fletcher up here. My low duration and fine level are both set to normal. And that's a little confusing for some users. Basically, when we set up circulation policies, we can apply both a regular and a short policy to them, where if somebody comes into the item attributes and sets it to normal, then whatever we have set in that circulation policy as the normal duration will apply. So it'd say 21 days. Whereas if somebody came in here and reset it to short, then whatever we have set as the short duration for that item would be set instead. So this is confusing simply because a lot of libraries do not actually have multiple different duration periods. They have a standard one, and then maybe for other types of items, they have a completely different circulation policy that applies a different loan duration, but they don't often have two different loan durations that would apply to the same type of item. If that's something you're interested in, if you'd like to be able to set, some of your best sellers to a shorter duration period than others, then that is something we can set up, but you would need to submit a ticket. Same for the fine level. It functions the same where we can set something up on the back end to function at different levels. And once that's been done, you can set to like low, normal, or high fine levels. And then the other thing that's really important down here is the circulation modifier. This is one of the most important pieces to tell Evergreen how this item should circulate. So it's really important that you set it. So currently I've got one of them set. This is the one that existed. And then the one that I've added needs to be set. So I'm going to set it to book as well. Now, if this is a standard for a new adult fiction book, then I could save this as a template. Because I have that age hold protection set. So I could save that as a template, which means that next time I come in to catalog a new adult fiction book, I can simply apply this template. And let's create, see if just refreshing this does it. I just want to clear out all the stuff that I did. Yeah, so I've just refreshed it, which means all the stuff that I've added is no longer showing up because I hadn't saved it yet. So I'm going to come up here to my templates. I'm going to choose new adult fiction, which I've just created, and click apply. And that automatically creates those details that I had set in the template. Now, one thing you can do with templates, if you have multiple people in your tech services department and you'd like to be able to ensure that everybody has the same consistent templates to work off of, I can export this to myself, and that's going to download onto my computer as a JSON file. And then I can share that with my colleague. I can put it in a shared folder or on a thumb drive or however I share files. And then they can come in and they can click the import button, and that's going to pull up a window from which they can choose the file and actually import that in. So you can share templates with other people you work with, or even across different institutions. Now, once I've done everything that I wanted to do, I would click apply all and save, and that would save these materials. That is the basics of working with holdings. There are a lot more details to it. And that's something that if there are questions, we can certainly get into additional aspects of it. But from here, I'm going to move into talking about transferring holdings from one call number or one bib record or one library. Any other questions before I get into that? All right, so let's go ahead and talk about transferring holdings. So sometimes it happens that a copy is placed in the wrong branch or attached to the wrong call number or put on the wrong bib record. And sometimes this is a result of an error. Sometimes it's simply a case that you are moving something around, that you're spreading some of the copies that you have of a certain item to other branches within your system. In this case, it is possible kind of on a one-by-one basis to go in and manually make all of these changes to the items directly, but it is often much more efficient to transfer them between the different records or the different branches. And this allows you to basically move things around, reattach them to new places, but also returning or retaining all of the circulation history for that item. So it's something that we recommend that you do if you do have a situation where you need to move things around. It is sort of on the borderline between item and bib cataloging. Some of it does involve bib records, and in that case, I believe you do need to have bibliographic cataloging permissions to do, but some of it is simply at the item level. So basically, depending on what you're trying to do, there are going to be details that are different, but overall the process is the same across every different type of this transfer process. So there's one process and there's sort of three different things that you can apply that process to. At its most basic level, the process is to mark the target, the place where something's being moved, then select the item that's being moved, the item that'll be transferred, and then choosing transfer to marked location from the action menu. Now, depending on what you're moving and to where, the things that you're marking and the exact version of transfer to marked location will be a little bit different, but the overall process is the same. Let's go ahead and take a look at this live. So within this same bib record that we were working in before, there is one item that is definitely not where it's supposed to be. I'm going to change my view to look at 100 rows. I don't think there are 100 copies, but and then I'm going to scroll down until I see the one that I know is not where it should be. If somebody sees it before me, please feel free to, oh, here it is. Adult large print. So this record is for a regular print version of this book, but Fletcher has it in the has an adult large print version of this book attached to this record. And just to be very clear, so if anyone from Henderson is here, you didn't actually make this mistake. I did this on purpose so that I could show it. So basically what I want to do is take this item, this large print copy of this book, and transfer it from this record to the correct large print record, because of course we don't put large print items on regular print records. So the first thing that I'm going to do is find the large print record that I need. So I'm going to come back into another one of my tabs, and I'm going to do a quick search for this item. And of course, I could do some additional details in this search to make it specific for the large print, but I happen to know that the large print will come up near the top of the results, so I'm just going to do the most basic search. All right, yeah, it's the very first option. So I'm going to go into this record. And of course, in reality, I would make sure I had the book in front of me, make sure that it actually was large print and that the error wasn't in how that item was shelved or anything like that, but simply a large print item had been added to a regular print record. And I would make sure that it matched this record, was the correct, everything's correct. But what I'm going to do here is skip all that because I don't actually have the item in hand. And instead, I am just going to come right up here to this Mark For button. And this is a menu specific for marking things in the bib record level. And I'm going to mark this for holdings transfer. And I see down here, this little green box tells me that it was successful. If it's not successful, you get kind of a peachy yellow box that tells you that it didn't work. Next, I need to navigate back into the record that I want to transfer. So I've now marked the destination. I'm going to come back to the record that I want to transfer, and I'm going to go back to my Holdings View tab. We're already at Henderson, so we're already scoped the way I want to be, but I'm looking for Fletcher, and I just want to make sure that there's only one copy. There is. So I am going to select the call number level. So one of the things you'll notice as you're doing transfers is that you always go down one level. So if you are transferring an item to another bib record, you mark the bib record and then you transfer the call number because the call number is one level below the bib record. If you're transferring items between call numbers, then you mark the call number and you transfer the item. So you kind of are always going one step below in that hierarchy. So I'm going to select the call number, and then I'm going to come over here to the actions menu. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom to the transfer section, and I'm going to transfer holdings to marked destination. So now you'll see that Fletcher now has 0 copies of this item. And if I go back into my bib record for the large print, I'm going to refresh it. We now have a Fletcher holding here where we didn't before. So I was able to very easily move that. So if you do discover that you have accidentally attached the wrong item to a bib record, whether it's a large print situation or a DVD Blu-ray situation, or simply the wrong title, it's very easy to fix. Any questions about that? All right, so let's go ahead and talk. Oh, what did I click after I selected the item that I wanted to change? So when I was in the holdings view, this was not here anymore, but let's say we wanted to move this one, the Green River copy. I click the call number, and then I click this little icon up here. Throughout Evergreen, there's most of the grid pages, so this would be a grid, have an action menu. Sometimes it says action, sometimes it's just this hamburger menu with the check mark. But that's what I clicked, and then I chose transfer holdings to marked destination from that menu. Oh, and Jessica has pointed out that you can also right click on the call number. Yeah, so I can right click on this and it brings up the same menu. So you're still going to choose transfer holdings to marked destination. I always forget about the right clicking. All right. So the next thing that we're going to look at is basically moving call numbers between branches. So let's say that your system has decided to move all copies of something from one branch to another branch. So you can go into each copy and you can edit the home library and circulating library and the item attributes, or you can transfer the items in the holdings view. So if I go into Cumberland's holdings for the book Fourth Wing, I'm at Henderson right now, I'm going to switch that up to Cumberland because they have quite a few of this. So it's there's a lot to work with here. Let's say that East Cumberland has, Cumberland HQ has one copy of it, and several of our other branches also have one copy of it. I'm going to say that Bordeaux, maybe it's not circulating very well there. So we want to move both copies that are held at Bordeaux to Cumberland HQ. And so we can do that all in one motion by following essentially the same structure we did to move between bib records, but just sort of taking it down a notch. So the thing I'm going to do here is rather than selecting my bib record as my target, I'm going to select my branch as my target. So in this case, I'm going to be moving to Cumberland HQ. So I'm going to select that level. So we have basically within the holdings editor, or the holdings view, we have our system, our branch, our call number, our item. We want to make sure that we're selecting the branch level. So that's what we're looking for here. So I've selected the branch that I want, and I'm going to come up or right click to my actions menu. So when we did the bib move, we used the Mark 4. We're not going to do that for this. This menu only applies to the bib record as a whole, and we're not moving between bib records in this case. So we're going to ignore this button up here. And instead, we're going to come to our actions menu. And with our actions menu, we're going to come down to the section that says Mark, and we're going to choose to mark library call number as transfer destination. And you can see, come back in here. Oh. Nope, I'm thinking of something else. I was going to say it'll tell you that it's been marked, but it does not do that. But the next step that we'll do is similar to what we did before. Now that we've marked our transfer destination, next we're going to mark our item to be transferred. So I'm going to deselect the transfer destination, and I'm going to come up here to Bordeaux. Now, just like before, I marked the bib record, and then I went one step down to mark the thing to be transferred. In this case, I've marked my branch. So my next step down is going to be a call number. So I'm still going to mark the call number option here. I'm not going to mark the individual copies, but the call number. And what that's going to do is bring the call number and any holdings attached to it into my new branch, which means you don't want to do this if you are looking at bringing over just one copy of many. But if you want to bring over all copies attached to a call number at one branch to a different branch, then you would do this process. So I have selected the call number. And this time I will right click and I'm going to choose transfer holdings to marked destination. So you do have two options here. You have the holdings and the items. When moving between bib records and also moving call numbers between branches, you want to choose holdings because in this case, you're moving both a call number and a copy. Our next level that we look at, we'll be looking at just a single item, and that's when you would want to use transfer items. If you choose items when you have selected call number, it just won't work. Like you won't even get an error message. It just won't work. So we're going to choose transfer holdings to mark destination. It's reloading. And so now I can see Bordeaux now has 0 copies. And Cumberland HQ now has 4 copies. Now you'll notice that it only has one call number. So even though I moved the call number, Evergreen moved that call number and then it recognized that it was the same as the call number that existed at Cumberland HQ, so it merged them. So basically, rather than having 2 call numbers that are exactly the same, it just merged them into one and all copies are now attached to that call number. All right, any questions about working with transferring call numbers? Yeah, so if we want to move items, it won't, it will, you're right, Pat, that it will move items. That's the next thing that I'm going to show. So that's why I didn't want to do it yet. If you have selected a bib record and you choose items, nothing will happen. So sorry about that. That was a mistake on my part. But yes, we're going to now look at if you choose. No, it's fine. We're going to now look at moving items between call numbers. And you can do that between 2 different call numbers at one branch or different call numbers at different branches. This is also going to be helpful for you if you're doing something like what we did at the beginning where we moved an item to a different bib record. If you have several items attached to the same call number and only one of them needs to move, then you can actually move that to its own call number and then move that whole set of holdings to the new bib record. So in order to move a single item, I'm going to go to a different library system for this one because Buncombe has a lot of holdings of this particular title, and they are all at PAC. So, or they are very close to all at PAC. So if I am at Buncombe, I can see that PAC has 11 copies. A few of the other branches have 1, and many branches have 0. So what I could do here is determine that I want to move only a single item to another branch because rather than keeping everything consolidated at one branch. So I'm going to follow basically the same process where I'm going to mark my transfer destination. So I'm going to choose the call number that I'd be moving to. So let's say I'm going to move something from PAC up here to Black Mountain. So I'm going to choose my call number, and then I'm going to go up here to my actions menu, and I'm going to mark as transfer destination. And then I'm going to deselect that, and I'm going to come down here to PAC, and I'm going to use the arrow to open up this whole list so I can see each individual copy. And then I'm going to choose which copy to move. Now, in reality, I would probably want to make sure that this is a copy that I currently have on hand. Not necessarily one that's on the hold shelf. Checked out, I guess, would work out, because when it got returned, it would simply be transited to where it needs to go. But I would just probably want to make sure that I actually know that we have this copy that we're going to be moving. In this case, obviously, it's not an issue. So I'm just going to choose the first one on the list. And I'm going to right click, and this time I'm going to choose transfer items to marked destination. Now, when we chose the call number level and we moved our holdings, it moved every copy connected to that call number. In this case, I've only chosen a single copy, and now I'm choosing transfer items. So it's only going to move that one copy to my new destination. So I'm going to select that. And it is, I got a little green box saying that it was successfully transferred. And now at Black Mountain, I now have 2 copies attached to the call number. So it's a fairly straightforward process. I will say that it can sometimes, if you're doing a lot of these in a row, sometimes you can kind of get mixed up on what goes where. So I do recommend having maybe 2 tabs open that you're kind of looking at between the different places that you're moving things between. So I think if there's not a call number, it will create one. Let's try that real quick. So I'm going to select, what do we have here? North Asheville doesn't have any. So I will select that as my transfer destination. So at this point, I'm selecting the branch rather than the call number. And then I will choose a copy. I think this is what Pat was talking about, that it will transfer just the item in this case. So I'll try that. Yep, it says successfully transferred. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to duplicate the call number that was existing. We moved it to North Asheville. Yep, so it duplicated the call number that it was already tied to. So I was able to move it to a place that did not yet have a call number. Any other questions? So this process in general allows you to kind of be efficient in either correcting cataloging mistakes or moving materials around your system. It gives you, if you're moving several materials at once, say an entire set of James Patterson novels that you're moving to storage now that the new ones come out, and less people are checking out the old one, you can do all of that kind of in a single function rather than going in and manually changing them all in the item attributes. All right, so let's go on, and we're going to move on to talk about bib cataloging. If you do end up having some more questions about transferring or anything with item management, feel free to put that in the chat, and we'll either come back to it if we have a chance to, or I can get back to you directly after the session is over. But at this point, we're going to move into bib cataloging. And for this portion, we're going to talk about importing and overlaying, merging, and cataloging reports. Cataloging reports really are its own separate category, not necessarily bib cataloging. We're going to start by talking about importing and overlaying records. And within the context of this, the focus is going to be a little bit more on overlaying. Importing, we will touch on what that looks like, and I'll give a brief description of how to do it. If you do find that you need additional information on that, it's covered pretty extensively in our training materials and on YouTube and in our knowledge books, but I'm also happy to answer questions after the fact as well. But we're basically going to talk about the concepts of importing and overlaying within both the batch upload and C3950. Batch upload is useful when you have large number of records that you're going to be bringing in, especially if you already have those records. Your vendor has supplied them to you. It utilizes the 852 field for holding details, and there are 3 different options we're going to talk about for auto overlaying. Z3950, on the other hand, is really useful for individual records. So if you have maybe something that you ordered from Amazon where you don't have a vendor supplied record, but you have just a single item or a few items that happen to not exist in Cardinal yet. So I think C3950 is most often used for people to pull in records from non-Cardinal libraries, but you can also get local Cardinal records. And that can be useful if you're doing something like you were the first person to get a large print copy of something. You can pull out the original record for the regular print. You can import it, re-import it back in as a new record and edit it to reflect that it's large print, rather than going all the way from scratch for cataloging this. And that could make your life a little easier. The holdings that you would add in this case would generally be done manually. But you can also do a lot of overlaying. So that's what we'll really talk about today. It's using C3950 to overlay records. So within the batch uploader, there are basically 3 different overlay options that we're going to talk about today. There's the merge on exact match, auto overlay in process acquisitions items, and auto overlay on order cataloging items. So let's go ahead and take a look at the batch uploader. When using the uploader, obviously you can upload records sent from your vendor to create new records, and that is the majority of what this is used for. So when your vendor sends you records, assuming that the details in your 852 field were correct, then it will attach the correct holding for your library to those records. If there is not an existing record in NC Cardinal already, then it will create a record. However, you can also use the batch uploader to overlay existing records that may need some extra information, or that you want to very quickly change the status of. And basically all of those options are over here in this section. So we're going to look at all 3 of them. Now, really quickly, I'm going to just go over what we do for a standard batch upload. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this process, I will show you how it works, but the big details will be in the overlay process. So for the most part, you're always going to keep your record type at bibliographic record. And then you always need to create a queue. I would recommend that you always create a new queue, that you don't try to add to existing queues. That is very hit or miss in as to whether or not it's going to be functional. And it's also a lot easier to access your uploads if you create a new queue each time. So I'm going to create a queue for today. And so it'll be the first of perhaps many queues that I create today. And I typically follow this pattern where I put in the date. And then if I know I'm going to have more than one, and I usually assume if I'm uploading stuff, I'm going to probably upload a lot of things. So I usually will do like an underscore and then the version number. You can set up whatever pattern works for you, but I do recommend that you have a pattern because it'll be a lot easier to navigate those queues in the future if you do. Now for my record match set, I'm always going to choose Cardinal Match. It is the only option, so I don't have much choice there. For the holdings import profile, there are 2 here. Always choose Evergreen 852 unless you are the state library. So Evergreen 852 is your profile. This is the part where it could change depending on what you're trying to do. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be choosing match only merge. We will talk in a few minutes about a couple of instances where you would choose something different, but most of the time you're going to choose match only merge. And we ask that you really do choose that, because if you choose the wrong merge profile, you can really mess up some existing bib records. The match only merge means that all it will do is look for a match, and if that match exists, it will merge any new information from the record that you're putting in into that existing bib record. It will not overlay any information. So match only merge is important, basically to not undo the work of other catalogers. We had an instance over the summer where there was a significant amount of failure to use match only merge, which resulted in a lot of changes to records that people had put a lot of time into, stripping out erroneous and unneeded information, and it kept coming back because people were choosing a different merge profile. So always choose match only merge unless you're doing one of the things we're going to talk You don't need to worry about anything else right here. We're going to come over to this side here. And generally speaking, you're going to choose system local for your record source. And then you're going to choose import non-matching records. For a regular batch upload, always include that because it's going to search for a match first. But if it can't find a match, it will import the entire record that you have in your file. This is where things get a little different. For a basic upload, you're going to choose merge on best match. This means that Evergreen is going to look at all the records. It's going to use several different fields within the records to determine what the best record to match your record is. And then it is going to merge onto that record. You pretty much always want to use that one, unless you are overlaying, which is what we're going to do now. So I'm going to deselect that, and we're going to start with a merge on exact match. So when you are doing a merge on exact match, you would usually use this if you have downloaded a record, made edits, and are uploading it back into the system. This is not something that most people do. Basically, if you have found that a number of records all have sort of the same mistake, and you'd like to pull them out, go into Mark Edit, and batch edit them so that they are all fixed, you can do that, and then you can put them back into the system by using merge on exact match. And what this does is it looks at the 901C field, and that's where the TCN is stored. So when you download the records that exist in NC Cardinal's Evergreen, then you're downloading a 901C field with the TCN for that record. When you go to upload it back and you choose merge on exact match, then it will look at that 901C and see whether or not it exists in NC Cardinal. And if it does, it will merge on that record and only that record. It won't, see that it doesn't match there, but there's another one that has the same 020, so it'll merge on that one. It will only merge if the 901C field matches. So in a situation like this, where you've downloaded something, edited it, and then are putting it back into the catalog, this is what you would want to do. Now, when you are ready to re-upload that record, you have to do one other thing or it will not work. You have to come back over to your merge overlay or your merge profile, and you have to switch it from match only merge to Evergreen import. This is the only situation where you should ever use Evergreen import, because this will overwrite some of the information that exists in the existing record. So you only want to do this if you're very sure that the record is correct. You're very sure that you're not going to be undoing anybody else's work. So, if this is something that you're planning to do and it takes you several weeks to finish it, I would go back to the records that you are going to be overlaying and seeing if there's been significant edits to any of them. It will not overwrite any holdings information, so there won't be any issue there, but it will overwrite some of the actual content of the MARC record. So just be really careful with this one. If you were doing it though, this is how you would. So we are basically have a few different things set. I'm going to unset this one. Actually, no, I'm going to leave that on because basically what you could do is if there was an issue with your 901C and so therefore it did not merge, you can still import your updated record and then you can go in and do a manual merge with the correct record later on. So basically what I've done here is I've said I'm importing, which means I'm going to overlay some of the information in the record. I will bring in a new record if it doesn't match, and the only way it could match is if the 901C fields are the same, the TCNs are the same. I'm going to go ahead and choose a file. I hope that was the right file. I suddenly realized that I'm not certain which one I was supposed to use, but I'm going to try to upload it and we'll see. So I'm uploading and it looks like everything worked. It uploaded it, it queued it, and it imported it. And that's key. If it had been incorrectly formatted, then it would not have imported it. And so I'm going to go into my queue. And you can see up here in your queue summary that I had one record. Let's see, it looks like it was not imported though. It had significant items. All right, I'm going to try that again with a different file because that's not what I wanted. Told you I would have to use more than one here. I think I know what I did wrong there, or what incorrect one that I used. All right, I'll try this one. If it doesn't work, then I'm not going to worry about it too much. I would know for sure which file because I would have named it well, which I failed to do. So you would know for sure which file based on how you have saved it. I did not save it well, which is why it's not working. Okay, this one is a little bit closer to correct at least. But basically what you want to look for in this Q summary is that you have imported records, but you have not imported items because you're not overlaying any holdings information. You are only overlaying data within the MARC record itself. If I go into the record that I was attempting to overlay, we can take a look at it, see whether or not I managed to get it with the correct file. All right, I'm just going to do a quick catalog search for it. So what I would want to do to see whether or not it worked properly is to go into my MARC edit and see, or my MARC view, and see whether or not the changes that I made in my MARC edit file are showing up. And I basically, when I made my changes, I had done some updates to the 520 field, so it looks like that did come in properly. So basically with the 901C, you are taking an existing record within Evergreen, you're downloading it, you're making edits, and you're re-uploading it to overlay that existing record. This is something that you want to do with caution because you obviously do not want to mess up what was otherwise a good record or undo somebody else's work. However, this is absolutely a good option to use if you have a number of records that all need edits to them. It's a lot faster and easier to edit them within a software like MARC Edit than to go into each individually. So this is an option for you, but I would caution you to use it very sparingly. The next one that we'll look at, and we're only going to look at this one briefly, is the acquisitions overlay. So we're going to come back into our MARC batch import export. And this time we'd be looking at the auto overlay in process acquisitions items. So basically this option is really only useful if you are using acquisitions. If you're not using acquisitions, this won't do anything for you because one of the keys of whether or not this process will work is that it will only look at items that were generated through the creation of a line item in acquisition. So if you don't have that, then you're not going to have, then this auto overlay will not work regardless of anything else that you have set up. Basically, what this does is it allows you to update your holdings with your permanent barcodes and call numbers after receiving them. So when you create your acquisitions order and you have sort of a placeholder barcode and a placeholder call number, once you receive those items with the final barcode and call number, if your vendor has sent you an updated record, you can then use that record to re-upload and overlay those barcodes and call numbers. This will only work if the item has been marked as received. So if you go in to upload this prior to marking items received on your purchase order, you're actually going to create a duplicate holding, which you can go in and, and delete and redo, but those are extra steps that I don't think anyone wants to do. So just make sure that you are first marking items received, and then you can use the auto overlay in process acquisitions items. Otherwise, most of the rest of this is the same. So you would check this box, and then your merge profile, you would choose orders. Everything else you would do the same as you would for a regular upload. The final one that we'll look at is the auto overlay on cataloging items. So this is similar to the auto overlay in process acquisitions items. With the acquisitions one, it looks for basically three things when attempting to find a match. It looks first to see whether or not the owning library connected to the copy is the same as the owning library connected to the copy that you're trying to overlay. It checks to make sure that the item was generated first through acquisitions, and then it checks to make sure that the status of that item is in process. With cataloging, it does essentially the same thing, except that it does not look, obviously, to see that it was generated via acquisitions. It does look to see that the items, that the owning libraries match, and then it looks to make sure that the item is currently listed as on order. So if you have an item that's listed as on order and your 852 owning library matches, then you can auto overlay it. And so this allows you also to put in permanent barcodes and permanent call numbers if you've used placeholders in the brief record that your vendor sent you. It also allows you, if that brief record was truly brief and you now have a longer one, to auto overlay that. So for this one, you would choose the auto overlay on order cataloging items, and then you would choose the match only merge. So in this case, you're going to be choosing the standard merge profile. For the most part, our process for this option is otherwise very similar to the regular upload compared to some of the others that we've looked at. The only thing that's really different is that we're selecting that auto overlay on order cataloging items. Basically, we're just looking to make sure that the org unit and the 852 fields matches. And then the only thing that's really going to get overlaid, because we're choosing that match only merge, is the 852 and the rest of the updated holding information that you have there. We will try this one as well and see if I've got the right record or the right file. So I'm going to choose my Cardinal match and my Evergreen 852. I've got my match only merge. I've got my auto overlay on order cataloging items. I'm going to choose a file, and we're going to go with this one. Let's see if it works. That's not a great sign because it didn't import anything before it allowed me to go to my queue. I'll go take a look. So it looks like it did, it's got an item in queue, but it's not importing it. We can take a look at the record for it, potentially. Okay. And we can take a look at the mark view. Actually, in this case, we'd want to look at the item table and see if my new option came in. So we look at the active create date. So I think what happened here is that I did all of this on the 22nd as I was practicing, and I did not undo it correctly. And so it's not overlaying things because those things are already in here. So I apologize for that. Yes, there is in our knowledge books. All of this is laid out in the cataloging knowledge book. So I can grab that URL for you. So if you are not familiar with the NC Cardinal knowledge books, this is where our documentation lives. It's just at nccardinalsupport.org. I'm going to go into the cataloging book, and I'm going to go into bibliographic cataloging and the batch import bibliographic records and holdings. This is going to be where this documentation is. So you can take a look at this. Now, as I said at the beginning, these are sort of the 3 overlay options. They are not the standard. The standard is simply uploading, and that is just a process of basically creating your queue, choosing a cardinal match, an Evergreen 852, and a match-only merge. And then your standard over here is going to be import non-matching records and merge on best match. And generally what you're going to be uploading will be vendor supplied records. And there's, I believe, some videos within our YouTube channel as well that go over this. And there are some really good videos from Evergreen, Indiana that go into this in pretty strong detail as well. That'll follow the same process. All right, so the overlay options basically allow us to merge on exact, which allows us to replace an existing record with a new record. Use this one cautiously. Auto overlay in-process acquisitions items. The only caveat with this is please make sure that you have marked your items as received before attempting to auto overlay. And auto overlay on order cataloging items. And the big issue here is just making sure that your 852 profile information is correct. And that's something that you're going to want to make sure you're doing in a regular batch upload as well. Are there additional questions about overlaying or about the batch uploader in general? All right. So let's talk about sort of the same thing, but within the context of Z3950. So once again, Z3950 is generally used to bring in new records that do not yet exist in NC Cardinal. Unlike the batch uploader, this is something that you're going to be doing with records that you do not have a file for, that you didn't receive a record from your vendor or something like that. And it's also for something where you're kind of doing things one at a time rather than in large batches. It does, in addition to allowing you to bring in a record from another library, it also allows you to overlay a record. So if there is a record in NC Cardinal, but it's very brief and you'd like to improve it, and you find a better record somewhere else via the Z3950, you can bring that in and overlay it. So I'm going to show you that process in a moment. Another thing that you can use it for, and I don't know how common this is, but it is something that I think is interesting, is that you can use it to make a copy of a local record. So as I said, you know, if you're the first person to get the large print of something, and rather than creating a record from scratch, if your vendor hasn't sent you one, you can actually use the Z3950 to find local records and then make copies of them basically by re-importing them via Z3950 and then edit them to reflect the item that you have in hand. So that's something that I don't know gets used a lot, but it is an option. And then you can also, if you find that you need a record, it doesn't exist in NC Cardinal and you don't have one from your vendor, and you can find maybe 2 different ones, and neither of them are great. But they are both great in different, or not great in different ways, then you can import one of them and then overlay aspects of the other one on top of it. So you can actually kind of merge them together to create a better record. So that is also an option. Today, we're just going to be looking at that overlay process though. So let's take a look at a record that could use some improvements. And once again, this is something that I did for the sake of this training. Stanley and Pack did not create such a bad record to begin with. but basically we're looking at a very, very brief record. It's not incorrect, but it has the least amount of information that it can have and still be functional. So I would like to improve that record. So I'm going to go into Z3950 to do so. It's over here. And I'm going to go under the cataloging menu and choose import record from Z3950. And I'm going to select local catalog. And then I think I usually start with Colorado Unified. Generally speaking, I would recommend always searching for the local catalog. First of all, that way you can see if there actually is something that is held at the NC Cardinal level that maybe you missed in an earlier search. It also allows you to kind of check things as you're going. If you're trying to overlay, obviously you're going to want to check the local catalog so that you get the record to be overlaid coming up in your results. And if you are just looking for a different format or something like that, but you want to make sure that you're getting information that's as close to the original as possible, then having that local record is always good. In addition to that, I would recommend never going beyond 2 or maybe 3 services that you're searching at a single time. It can end up going very slowly when you start adding too many. I'm going to search for my title. Go back into my bib record, copy it, and I'm going to search for the title. And it looks like I got 4 hits. So the top one is the native Evergreen catalog record. That means it's the NC Cardinal record. When you see that native Evergreen, it means whatever your instance of Evergreen is. And then I have 3 from Colorado Prospector. Now this last one says unabridged. That makes me think it's probably a audiobook. So I'm just going to ignore that one. And then these other 2, one of them has the same ISBN as the local record. Another one has a different ISBN. I'm going to open this one up and just take a look by clicking on the View Mark button up here. And just scanning through it, it looks like this is an ebook. So this is not the one that I want either. So I am going to look at number 2, and I'm going to hope it's better than what I have. So Carol, you're in the community college system, is that correct? If that's the case, then this is how we have it set up within NC Cardinal. The community college system will need to go through and add additional services that they'd like to have available to search. And that has to happen. I think Mobius can probably do that for you. Yeah, so I would reach out to Mobius and see if they can add some extras for you. All right, so I have got the record that I'm most likely going to use, and I'm going to open it up and just take a look at it. It's not much better than what I have, but it's a little better. I've at least got some 650 fields, so there are some aspects of it that tell me that this is for both a hardcover and an ebook, so I'm going to want to make some changes before I overlay it, but I think I'm going to be happier with this than what I have already. So to overlay, the process is actually not that different than when you're transferring. So the first thing I'm going to do is choose the target. So the native Evergreen catalog, our NC Cardinal record, is my target, and I'm going to choose this button, Mark Local Results as Overlay Target. And you can see over here that it now record is marked for overlay. Then I'm going to come in here to the record that I would like to put on top of the existing record. And I am going to choose the button here that says overlay. And this will bring up both records so I can compare them, just make doubly sure that they're for the same thing. So, I'm going to do things like check the 020 and make sure that my ISBN is the same, and it is. However, I know that I do not want the second 020. So I'm actually going to cancel out of here, and I'm going to go in and, I'm going to stay in there, and I am going to edit the Z3950 record. And so this brings up a flat text editor. I could also go into the other editor, but I actually am more comfortable with the flat text editor in this context. And so I'm going to just delete that 020 field that I don't want. I'm also going to delete this 776 field. And there's probably other things in here that a cataloger could tell me I want to get rid of, but I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go ahead and overlay. So this brings me now into the Evergreen record, and I'm going to go into my mark view, and I can see that now I've got all those 650 tags that I did not have before. So it's overlaid that very sparse record that I had before with this longer record. So this is a way that you can improve on very brief records that we have within NC Cardinal. All right, so that is generally what I wanted to show you within Z3950. Of course, you know, if you're doing a Z3950 search, and let's just remove the local catalog, and you do your search and you see, oh, there's no native Evergreen options in here, then you could just choose one that you think is the best and click on edit, then import, make any edits that you need to, and import that, and it's going to bring it in for you. So you can get records that way as well. You will have to add your holdings manually at that point, though. Are there any questions about overlaying within Z3950 or anything in general about Z3950? All right. Well, let's finish by talking about merging records. So, or finish talking about bib records by talking about how to merge them. So this is one of the key things that a bib cataloger is going to be doing. And merging records primarily happens as a result of, you know, two different records being pulled in for the same item. Sometimes it happens simply because somebody failed to fully search within NC Cardinal before pulling in the record. Sometimes there was an issue in either the existing record or the new record that is being uploaded where it does not view it as a match. And of course, we do have our annual deduplication project that takes care of a fair amount of this automatically, but there are always going to be those records that are the same, but they are just showing up as too different to be caught by that process, or things that you catch outside the boundaries of that process. So we're going to take a look at merging. The main reason that we merge bibs is because our goal in NC Cardinal is to make resource sharing and access to materials as seamless as possible for the patron. And so basically what we're trying to do is to make our search process patron friendly. Generally speaking, especially when we're talking about fiction, our patrons are looking for the content, not necessarily the container. So we, even though it is against standard cataloging processes or practices, we merge various different editions onto a single record. And so that's what we're trying to do, generally speaking, when we're merging bibs. I am going to be showing you the merge process from the perspective of using a bucket. And that is something that I recommend that you do. It is much faster and much easier and less prone to error to work out of a bucket than it is to merge from the records themselves. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I recommend that you, in your libraries, if you are not already doing this, create a shared record bucket so that as people find items that may need to be merged, they can add them. So if an item cataloger or circulator comes across an item that they believe may be a duplicate record, then they can put it in that record bucket so that then the bibliographic cataloger can go into it regularly and check to see whether or not it is a good candidate for merging, and then conduct the merge there. A couple of tips before we get into the merge process. The first thing that I would recommend that you do is, if you are at all unsure post a question to the Cataloging Basecamp group. You'll get lots of advice from there, and that's really what it's there for. So if you are even a little bit hesitant, post a question there before doing a merge. Only merge 2 to 3 bibs at a time, because if you have more than that, it's very difficult to read the display. When working with a record bucket, and we'll see this in a second, it's really helpful to sort it by the fingerprint, so everything is in order and potential duplicates are next to each other. Also, double check the deleted column and make sure everything says no. If something says yes, then don't merge it because it's already deleted. Use the enhanced mark editor to review or edit any fixed fields. Use the patron view to review the info. And after merging, check the merge history in the record notes tab. This is a fairly new option that came in our last upgrade. So we'll take a look at that, and you can actually see when something was merged and what it was merged from, and that's really useful. The first step when merging, whether you're in a bucket or not, is to look closely at the record. You're basically trying to make sure that these really are the same 2 items. Obviously, they should have the same title, and they also need to have the same creators, whether that's authors or directors or producers. If we're talking about audiobooks, the same narrator is important. If it's not the same narrator, it's not the same audiobook, so we wouldn't merge it. Look for series information. This isn't a definite. There are going to be some items that maybe do not have the series attached to it, but that doesn't mean it's not the same title as something else. But also make sure that there's, if there is series information that says in one record that it's book 4 and in a different record that it's book 5, that may not be one you want to merge. You might need to do a little bit more detective work on to why that is coming up differently. Obviously, do not merge large print onto regular print. Check the form, D equals large print. If one of your records says D and the other one does not, then do not merge them. Also, do not merge board books and regular books or regular picture books. Generally speaking, if a parent is looking for a picture book and they get the board book, they're not thrilled, and vice versa. Additionally, board books can often be merged, so we don't want to merge those. The print versus ebook, also do not merge those. For the most part, what you're looking for is that the content is the same. So if you're talking about AV materials, what that generally means is the same number of discs and the same length. Sometimes number of discs can vary a little bit between editions, but it is otherwise generally the same. It's a judgment call. If you have 5 discs in one record and 4 discs in the other record, but they have the same length, it's most likely okay to merge, but you might want to just do a little bit of digging before making the call. With DVDs and Blu-rays, if there is bonus or special content, it is okay to merge that, even if one record has the bonus content and the other one doesn't. But you do want to make sure that you are only merging when the format matches, so do not merge a DVD onto a Blu-ray or vice versa. Also, with DVDs and Blu-rays, full screen and widescreen should be separate. And this is rare, but it does come up. If you have an item that was colorized, so like if you have the Alfred Hitchcock movie Suspicion, which was originally shot in black and white, and then years later colorized to Technicolor, and the color version loses so much of the mystery that it's just a different movie altogether, don't put those on the same record. I think that's fairly rare though. So these are really what you're looking for when you're looking at merging. And so if you are still in doubt, ask on Basecamp. Let's go ahead and go into a record bucket and look at some items to merge. And we're not going to spend too much time in here because I do want to show you the cataloging reports. But if I go into my bibs to merge bucket, I can see I've got several different potential titles here, but they're also all over the place. I want to make sure that the same titles are next to each other. So I'm going to sort by fingerprint. And this allows me to ensure that all of my items are in order by their title. I'm also going to check my deleted column, and I see right off the bat that I've got 2 Casablancas. One has not been deleted and one has. So I'm not going to merge those. I'm just going to click both of them, and I'm going to come to my actions menu, and I am going to remove them from my bucket. So that one was easy. Always check the deleted column first. Let's take a look at this Good Omens. So I'm going to click on both of these, and I'm going to come up to my Actions menu and look at my Merge Selected Records. And then I'm going to compare the records to see, well, are these really the same item? So a couple of different things I'm going to look for. Obviously, they have the same title. They do have different authors. So the 245 on this one has Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett in that order, whereas the 245 on this one on the right switches them, which is why when I had my when I have them in this grid and I look at the author, they have different authors listed. Turns out they have the same 2 authors on both. They're just listed in different orders. So I'm not worried about that. But one thing that I am concerned about is that in this one here on the right, it says that the audio disc is 5 hours in the 300 field. The one here on the left, the 300 field, has it listed as 12 hours and 30 minutes. There's no way that's the same item. So I'm going to cancel this merge and I'm going to remove these. On the other hand, let's take a look at this Miseducation of Cameron Post. So I'm going to look at merging these two and I'm going to compare them. I see that they have the same running length. I see that they are both, see the 538 has them both as DVDs. Got the same director, same producers. Overall, this is looking pretty close to the same to me. I'd probably spend a little bit more time with it in reality, but within this this context, I'm going to say they're the same. I'm going to select the longer record as my lead, and then I am going to merge them. And so that is going to pop me into the new merged record here. I can come in here to my record notes tab, and I can see that this record was merged today, and it tells me the original TCN of the record that was merged onto it. So if there's ever an issue and we have to have something unmerged, this will give us the details that we need to send to Mobius to unmerge. So these are the basics of merging from a bucket. Like I said, this is going to be a much faster process than trying to merge between 2 separate records in different tabs or something like that. I'm not going to go through all the rest of these because I do want to show you cataloging reports, but are there any questions about merging? They are not removed from the list. So you see, we just merged Miseducation of Cameron Post. There are still 2 different ones for that one. If I click on the one, I think this is the one, this one was merged into this one. So if I click on the one that I merged into, then I get this weird blank record. So that's a little confusing. I don't yet. So Robert says that if I refresh, it will show as deleted. Yeah, and actually just clicking the back button, now it's showing as deleted, but it does not remove it from the list. I think that's confusing. I don't know why it works that way, but that's the way it works. You can always remove it, obviously. I guess they probably leave it in there so that you can kind of see what you've done. But... All right, any other questions? All right, so let's take a look at cataloging reports. Now these are different than the reporter. The reporter allows you to run all kinds of reports about cataloging, and some of them are easier to run than others, and some of them tell you more than others. The cataloging reports are pre-built reports that exist in Evergreen. You do not have to go into the reporter to access them. They basically show mismatches. So let's go ahead and just take a look at those. Oh, I don't want to go straight into it. I want to navigate there so you see how to do it. If I go to the cataloging menu and I choose Cardinal cataloging reports from that menu, it's going to take me to a list of, oh, I need to do this. So it's going to take me into a list of all of our systems. I can choose one and I can basically see any potential mismatches. So if I have an audiobook item on a bib that's not an audiobook, that's going to be listed here. Or conversely, if I have an item that's not an audiobook that's been listed on an audiobook bib, it's going to be listed here. So I can go into one of the items on this list and take a look at it. And I can determine, well, this one's listed as a juvenile kit. That's probably why it's being flagged as not an audiobook. I could go out to the shelves and check that and see, oh, this is an audiobook. It just comes with a puppet. So we've cataloged it as a kit. And I could remove it from that audiobook record if I wanted to, or I could leave it on. It would be a judgment call on my part. If I chose to leave it on, I could click ignore, and it's just going to remove it from that list. So I don't have to, oh, it failed to ignore. It feels very strongly that this item is not an audiobook. But I could go, I could also go in and actually use that process that we talked about earlier with transferring between records, and I could move it to the correct record. So this is something that I recommend that you check regularly if you are not already. You know, it could be once a week, once a month, depending on what your library's needs and workload is. And just coming in and checking all of these materials. And in some cases, it could be a thing where, you know, it's on order, so it hasn't really been fully cataloged yet. And that's probably why it's not showing up properly. But it could be a case where it is actually cataloged as a book and has been added to an audiobook record. Now, in this case, it looks like this one does have a circ modifier of audiobook. It's shelved with adult audiobook. So I don't think there's any reason to leave it on that list. So I could come back and ignore it. If, on the other hand, I came in here and I realized it was a book and it needed to be that it needed to be moved to a different record, then I could do that. I will get the, so generally speaking, somebody has asked when the recording will be available. It takes a few hours to process from WebEx, but then I do need to go in and caption it before I send it out. And that process can be a little bit lengthy. I will try to have it done by the end of the day tomorrow. But if I do not get it done by then, it will probably not be till Monday. But I will get it out to you as soon as I can. All right, any questions about the cataloging reports? We are at time, so if people need to leave, that's fine. But if people would like to stay around and ask questions, I can make myself available. So I'm happy to dig into anything else that people want to see after the fact. I can make the slides available as well. So I will send an email out with the recording, and when I do that, I'll send the slides as well. Let me make it. And I want to say thank you to all of my cataloging experts who were able to answer questions in the chat for me. I appreciate that you were able to be here. And I want to say thank you to everybody for simply attending. So if you find that you have questions, feel free to reach out. I will be happy to get back to you via email if you need.